Hey guys, this is the Battle Ready podcast. I'm Aaron McManus. This is my dad, Erwin McManus. We just got back from Scandinavia, Stockholm, Sweden, and Copenhagen, Denmark. It was really cold.
But it was amazing. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was really amazing, beautiful. And they kept saying they should have invited us in the summer.
No, I kept saying that.
You kept saying that.
They kept saying, in the summer, it looks like this. In the summer, we have this. And I said, stop talking to me about the summer. You didn't invite me here during the summer.
I think, is it a Danish thing? Is it the Denmark, the Copenhagen people? I don't know what I'm saying.
Well, they love the winter there, too, though. They're out riding on their... No, they love the winter, too. They're out there riding on their bikes. They're outdoors. They're enjoying life.
It was very different because Stockholm, it was actually very cold, at least for me. I was wearing everything I owned, except for the first day. I just wore like a leather jacket and a hoodie, and that was the dumbest thing I could have done.
You were like a fashion tragedy because you were wearing your Vans, and your Vans were soaking wet.
I thought it'd be fine. My Vans were soaking wet. My feet were cold, and then I was cold.
But you looked good.
I looked okay. And then I thought we'd be running around shooting, and so I needed to stay like light. And then all of a sudden,
and when you say shooting, you mean like filming?
Filming.
Because while you were in Sweden, you did go shooting.
I did go shooting. I did go hunting. And if you're, like a PETA advocate, I did not shoot anything. It was just more of like a bonding experience to go learn about hunting. And
don't worry, if Aaron goes hunting, all the animals are safe.
All the animals are safe. It was a pretty funny experience because I don't know if I'm allowed to name who took us because I don't think he wants us to name him.
Well, his name sounds like Pastor Andreas Nielsen.
That's messed up. So he took us to like the shooting range because he's grown up hunting and shooting, and so we went and did that, and that was really cool. There was like this it wasn't virtual reality, but it was like there was 2 projector screens, and then we got to shoot live ammo and like shoot at projected animals, and I was okay with that. Like that's fine to me because there's no emotional attachment. Like you're just, you're shooting video games basically. So he asked if I wanted to go hunting, and I think you wanted like a night to kind of just do your thing and rest and
I didn't want to go out in the freezing cold.
Yeah, that's basically what you. So he was like, hey, you should go hunting. You should go hang out, and we did. And then we got to his house, and he went to the garage, and he's like, hey, here. He just brought out like an entire thing of clothes. Like no lie, I had a t-shirt on. I had like long underwear, like Uniqlo Heat Tech, and then I had a pair of sweats, and then I had a pair of North Face sweats, and then I had a pair of like waterproof trousers. And so it was like 4 layers, and then I went and I had like a Under Armour North Face thing, and then I had another like North Face like zip up that was like the furry ones.
So were you cold?
I was so cold. I was warm. My feet were warm. My body was warm. But we went out to like this little cabin, and it was like a hut. It wasn't a cabin. It was like.
And you've never been hunting before?
Never.
And you
really. I told you. I said I think I'm scared to go hunting.
And you really couldn't shoot anything.
I don't think so. This was my like behind the scenes. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a great story for the kids. I don't have kids, but for like the church and for like Mosaic Venice and just for the podcast. So we went out. I got all dressed up, and he finally says, he's like, my daughters, they've hunted, they've like shot, they've done things.
Because it's a different world there. They actually hunt to eat.
They hunt to eat. No, and they hunt to eat, and they hunt like they don't hunt just for sport. They hunt to actually like feed families, and like they give a lot of meat to like 2 people, and it's a gifting thing, and it's awesome. So they're very respectful, very honoring. Me, on the other hand, was just scared. And then I asked, what are we hunting? And he said, we're hunting boar. And I was like, we're hunting piglet. That's what we're hunting. So not only was I like nervous because he said boar can like stab your feet, or like they can stab your legs. So you have to wear like Kevlar like pants.
Couldn't it be Pumbaa?
Pumbaa, yeah, I guess, but I don't think Pumbaa. Like I think Pumbaa's okay to go, but I think piglet. I think piglet, and I get sad and scared. But anyways, it was a good bonding experience, and then we drove out and we had a really good conversation.
But how many hours were you there, quote, hunting?
I mean, I think we drove like an hour outside of the city, and then we hunted for 2 hours.
But I think this is an important point.
Yeah,
you guys said you went hunting, but you never actually shot at anything.
No, we went sitting. We went to go sit. So he, the cool thing was he was like teaching me about the process and like how he grew up doing it and this whole thing, and it was insane. It was pretty cool. Also, like we just went and sat in this like hut that's like 5 feet off the ground, and he brought coffee, and I'm like in the 7 layers, and I had this like rabbit hat on. This hat that was, what do you call those, like snow hats, and then it had like rabbit fur, faux fur, maybe, I don't know, and it kept falling over my face, and I kept falling asleep because I was so jet lagged, and then I look over like an hour later. I don't really know how long it was. I look over and he's just like scrolling on his Instagram. Just like, I was like, I didn't know you could bring your phone. You said be quiet. And he goes, yeah, you need to be quiet. But I brought my phone.
But I think this is important because I remember years ago, I went fishing and I never caught a fish. And so I realized it was really just poling. I wasn't fishing. But really great fishermen are really patient.
Yeah.
Really great hunters are really patient.
Right.
They understand that there may be hours of waiting for that one moment where you are actually, by definition, hunting.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's this incredible lesson to be learned because generationally, we've almost been preconditioned to expect things to happen fast. We want things to happen immediately, right away. Yeah. And the idea of waiting 2 hours for one moment feels like an incredible waste of time.
Oh, I didn't feel like I wasted time, but I felt like we didn't I mean he at one point said, we could sit out here for hours, and I was like, how many hours? And no, but I don't know, with my generation everything's quick. I get that,
right? Because if you stayed all night and you never actually shot at anything, it would still be called hunting because the intention.
I'd be so mad. Now it'd be called angry.
No, but you see, here's what's important. It's the intention, that you're actually moving with a particular intention. And so he's hunting because he has an outcome he's trying to achieve, even if it's not achieved. See, I feel like this is one of the principles that we need to help people get into their life.
You're trying to teach me right now, and all I'm trying to do is tell a story about hunting and how it was a great bonding experience. But
you're talk about like helping someone come to faith. A lot of times we want it to happen right away.
Right.
And the reality is that it may take a great deal of time of building friendship and relationship and earning trust and a lot of coffees, a lot of dinners, a lot of times hanging and talking about everything else in life until you also earn the right to have the deeper conversations as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true in so many arenas, whether it's our career, whether it's a particular dream.
Yeah.
That we need to learn how to set in the process so that we can actually be there for the moment where the outcome is fulfilled.
Do you feel like, because I know it's a generational thing, but I think a lot of it is the societal pressure that if I'm 29, I'm old. Like if you're if you're in LA and you're an actor and you try to get an agent at 23, they're like, you're old. We wanted you at 13, at 14, and you're a model at 16. If you're like a YouTube entrepreneur, like the older you are, the less you are like in the demographic of being shareable and being interactive. I think there's so few people who are actually older and wise who are giving information and reaching young people on like these newer platforms. So it's a bit of a pressure, right? So because I'm 29 and people are like, oh, well, you're getting older, and I'm like, I'm 29, like I don't even feel like I've even hit my prime yet, let alone like gotten to a place where I even understand enough to go do things on my own right now. I'm grateful I get to learn under people still. I'm grateful, you know what I mean? Like, so then to go, like I think when people feel the pressure of like, okay, fame, I think maybe it only applies to fame. But I feel like that's the same in like entrepreneurial like worlds. Like they feel like they got to make their tech break right now. They don't know how to build. I look at it and go, okay, call me in 6 years, 30. And if I'm not where I like closer to where I want to be, then we can have a conversation about maybe like disappointment or frustration. 10 years for sure. But I think it's like I'm in the long haul, right?
Absolutely. I remember when your sister Mariah was around 16 years old and she told me she was a has-been.
No, but if you grow up in LA, and you have wrinkles, like that's like it's like that doesn't go together. You know what I mean? I have friends who are my age doing Botox, and I'm stoked. Like it's weirder when you look in the mirror and you're like, oh wow, I'm not like 17 or 23 anymore. But then I look at it and I look at people and I go, it's kind of sad when people feel that pressure of you need to be beautiful is this way, and that sounds so cheesy, but I'm like, no, I think the fact that you can grow up in LA and then you go to a place like Sweden and people were just real. You know what I mean? Like people were so much more real. People were so much more dynamic about they're okay with getting married young and living life and building and
they believe that life takes time.
Yes, they understand that.
And that's, to me, a really beautiful thing. That and I think we have to somehow introduce this idea again, that it's okay to give life time to develop. Give yourself time. Don't stop being so hard on yourself going, I'm 24 and I haven't accomplished anything, or I'm 28, I haven't changed the world yet, I'm 29 and I'm still trying to figure things out. I think your 20s are when you just need to fail a whole lot. Just get failure under your belt, get comfortable with it. Yeah. And so that by the time you're 30, you're going, okay, I know I can fail and I'll be okay. Yeah. I mean, some of the biggest transitions in my life happened after I was 30. If you looked at my life...
You moved to LA when you were 30.
32, 33 years old.
So you're let's talk, your life hadn't even really started. Like the life where people know, like the life of people knowing who you are didn't start for another 10 years.
Yes, that's exactly right. Up to the age of 29, I don't think I'd ever spoken to more than 200 people at one time.
Have we told that story here? No. You should tell that story. The story of when you first spoke to people.
And so here I was.
200 people.
I'm 29 years old. I'm pastoring a church that I basically started. We're probably averaging 100 people, 120 people.
Where were you guys?
In the middle of South Dallas by the Cotton Bowl. It was at that time the highest crime rate, highest murder rate area, I think, in the United States.
3 years in a row.
And
you can Google it.
And
South Dallas.
It was a very intense area. But frankly, I was killing myself, and I was working so hard, but I wasn't crushing it.
Yeah. And you were in a state, in a city where big churches were
everywhere,
blowing up all around you.
I kept hearing about churches starting and getting to 10,000, and I remember one time just sitting in my car, and I just started just kind of like weeping by myself, going, God, like, what's the deal? You didn't give me any talent. You're certainly not growing anything I'm doing. Yeah. And I was at the age of 29. From every statistical assessment, I was a complete failure.
Right.
And I just had to kind of hold on inside of myself that I wasn't a failure, because at least I had this person come to Jesus, and this other friend of mine whose life was changed, this other family whose life was changed. But objectively, I pretty much felt like I was a complete failure. Yeah. And I certainly didn't know how to do this thing called church, and I didn't seem to have any talent or gifting. And there I was, working backstage at an event at Reunion Arena, where the Dallas Mavericks used to play basketball.
Wow.
And I was just back there as a logistical guy with a flashlight pointing a direction for where people should go at the end.
Right. So you were an usher.
I was an usher. Yeah. I wasn't an usher, but I was an usher.
Okay.
And I didn't want to go that day because I was just tired, and I'd been doing it for years, and it just felt like it was kind of meaningless. I felt you could kind of work with a trained monkey and do what I was doing. I remember saying that to my wife, but she made me go because I made my commitment, and she made me keep my word. And when I got there, the guy who was supposed to be speaking, I had double booked another event, I think in Georgia. His plane was delayed. He wasn't going to make it. And he was supposed to speak. Wow. And then the other speaker who was supposed to speak the next day was on the golf course, and they couldn't get a hold of him.
Jeez. And
all of a sudden, the guy in charge of this event.
Is that why you don't play golf?
It's because it's just too slow for me, But I actually love the elegance of it. But I like fast things, And the guy in charge of the event was a guy who really didn't like me, and I didn't really like him very much either. And we didn't see the world the same. I was maybe a little bit obnoxious in the conversation we'd had, and he walks up to me and goes, Erwin, I think the Lord wants you to speak tonight. And I thought he was joking with me, just kind of like messing with me, In the moment I acted like I was excited, he'd go, Bird. And so I did. I just laughed. And he said it again, and I laughed again. The third time he grabbed me, started shaking me and telling me that I'm supposed to speak that night. Wow. And I was really confused because he probably had 10 to 15 guys who followed him around, all in really nice suits, who were all young preachers, who were in the system. And here I'm this guy in blue jeans and tennis shoes and a T-shirt working in the hood, and never speaking to more than 100 people. And 20,000 people were waiting for the speaker to come out. And for whatever reason, he felt like God told him it was me. I didn't even have a Bible with me. They went and found me a Bible. I went to a little room, fell on my face. I began weeping uncontrollably out of fear. Wow. And then I got on that stage, and I went from speaking to 200 to 20,000 with 30 minutes notice right before I turned 30 years old, right at the age of 29.
That's incredible.
2 months from turning 30. And that's how I think God often works. He shifts your life in a moment. If you're faithful in the small things, God opens up the big things for your life. And my whole life changed at that moment. And it was pretty extraordinary. And you were born the next year.
It's crazy. And then you moved to LA 2 years later?
2 years later. We moved to Los Angeles and started all over again. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a role. I didn't have any income. I had you, and Kim just gave birth to Mariah. We had our daughter.
You had 2 kids.
Patty, that God gave us, and so there's 3 of you.
And what that means is you adopted, basically. Adopted a high school
She was like our
kid.
adopted daughter. Yeah. And we raised her for 12 years. So
That's
awesome.
awesome.
I had 3 kids, my wife, and moved to LA, and I was unemployed. But we're starting all over again. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, if you looked at my life at 29, you would have said, wow, why haven't you accomplished anything with your life?
Yeah.
But the reality is that you're not only building the world around you, you're building the world inside of you.
I think that's really interesting too, because we have this conversation a lot. Like, there's a lot of people my age who have done a lot of things. Like, we live in a really cool city. I lived in New York for a few years. Guys my age were accomplishing far more than I was at 29, or even, I guess then I was 24, 25. And your biggest maybe piece of advice was, one, look at me where I was at 29, but also you're comparing your 29-year-old self, or really like 25-year-old self, to you at 55. Now I think the comparison game, and I know people say that cheesy thing of comparison kills, but I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that all the time. I just think the reality is that we look to people and we compete with them in our minds. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, but I also think being realistic about growth and where you're going might be a little bit different to where, another person went. But that's I think it's a mental game more than anything else.
And I use people as benchmarks.
Yeah. Who did you compare yourself to back then?
Well,
do we know any of them?
What?
Do we know any of them?
Probably don't. I didn't necessarily compare myself. Well, like, I compared myself to Salinger. I said I wanted to learn how to write like he wrote.
Right.
Catcher in the Rye.
But you didn't. You wrote more than one book.
I know, but that, I hadn't written any at the time.
That's true.
The people I would really use as benchmarks is I would use Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Picasso.
So
and
you were always influenced by people outside of really.
Outside of the faith, because it came from outside the faith.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know a lot of people inside the faith. And then there was a whole series of great communicators back then that you wouldn't know, because they've all passed away now.
Yeah.
And
you listened to Billy Graham a lot.
but even there were men kind of like a guy named Adrian Rogers, and there was, just these great communicators all over the world. And I would listen to them and go, wow, they communicate with such power, and every time they would speak, I would just feel shaken inside, and I kept thinking to myself, I want to be able to communicate like that. So I would listen to all these great communicators, and I would pay attention to how they said what they said, and I would listen to the parts that would affect me most, and I would just steal, but I wasn't stealing their content. I was trying to steal their essence.
And I think let's time out right there, because I think that's something that at least my generation, when I go on YouTube or Instagram or wherever, if a young guy follows me and they post their stuff, which bravo to you, because I'm never posting my stuff except for this on the internet until I know I'm at least decent. but great. I'll hit subscribe to make you feel better. But I think a lot of the times is I just hear like the same thing again and again and again, and content is hard. Like, I've only spoken a handful of times, and it is hard to write new content. I mean, it is one book of 66 books, but like, when you're generating new content is genuinely a difficult thing. But how did you figure out a way of telling the same stories in a new way? I think people mistake. First off, let me go back before I ask that question. I feel like people mistake content in essence. They take the cheesy Christian jokes or the cheesy church jokes, and they make conferences really hard to go to, rather than just coming up with their own life.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Usually when you're imitating someone, the irony is you end up imitating the worst part of their presentation.
I mean,
not the best part.
Yeah.
Because the worst part is the easiest thing to imitate.
Yeah.
The best part is the part that actually took them some work.
I mean, it was hard. That was hard. That's something you've really had to help me. Mm-hmm. Like I would get off platform and you'd go, "Who was that?" I was like, "That was me." And you'd be like, "No, that was like Matthew McConaughey trying to be Carl Lentz." Like that was something that was just stupid.
That was very transparent of you to put that on the podcast.
No, I think it's real. I think you gotta know, because I don't like, Carl was the only other speaker that I'd listened to other than you, you know, and so then he had changed my life, you know, so I was just not imitating. Well, I was imitating what I knew. Right. And there's a piece of that, right? Because I think absolutely. The same way is like I mean, I'm more like you because I'm your son, so there's things, but then I was just trying to also, you know, pull it out of me, like the ability
because
to
you'd
be on
seen
platform.
such power and impact through Carl's messaging.
Yeah, it was only a good thing. Yeah, but it's funny how it happens.
And then for whatever reason, you just added Matthew McConaughey.
I don't know where. I think I saw the Lincoln Navigator commercial, and just thought, I was like, oh, okay, I want to be that.
And you kind of look like him anyway, so I'm like, all right. Man. But I remember, I think it was this. I went up to you one time and I said, Aaron, I just want you to find your authentic self. I kept saying to you, and you get mad at me when I kept saying, I just want you to find your authentic self. And then one day you looked at me and said, Dad, what about if my authentic self is inauthentic?
I know, that was a bad moment. But, and there's no bad thing. It's nothing bad about like imitating people you really enjoy.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you kind of have to start there, because it is hard to write new content and to figure it out. I just think it's funny when people I heard someone preach Jensen's message. I heard Franklin Jensen. He has two first names. Pastor Jensen Franklin preach a message, and then I heard someone else preached a message, that same message. It just changed it, and it was like about, you know, disqualifying yourself. Like don't deem yourself unworthy, and it resonated with me. I think I took the quote I really loved and talked about it, but I talked about him too. Yeah. But we were in Copenhagen, and someone had maybe used one of your messages before we had gotten there, and but like the funny thing is about that is, I think for you kind of were like, oh well, that happened again. You handled it really well. I'm like that's what is happening right now?
The worst part is when they take your message and they do it better than you.
I know, and I think that's what we said about the person. We're like, man,
okay, that was
they're a ball of fire. Like, you know that they crushed that ending really well.
What's funny is that I ended up hearing that same talk from two different people on that trip.
I know that was funny. But I think especially when you know each other and then people just kind of borrow things from each other, it's funny. Like I genuinely laugh and like it. I think because it's a sign of, you know, like,
it's a compliment. Endearment. It's endearment. Here's the thing I tell people: start with imitation. Imitate the people that you admire and that you feel like are really effective in what you want to do, and then move to emulation, where you're affected by them, you're informed and influenced by them, but you're not trying just to imitate them, and then move to like what I would maybe say like innovation, to where like you're going, okay, I've learned everything that, you know, they've taught me, but now I'm really discovering myself and becoming a new voice because it's my voice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I love that. I think I'd rather people steal your content and the way that the church speaks and communicates gets a little bit more, not intelligent, because I think the people do the best they can, you know what I mean? But you created a different language, because LA is very different. Like Texas to LA is such a different world, and the same kind of jokes don't work here. That was the conversation we were having with Andreas Nilsson. He's like, Swedes humor is so different than US humor. So when like US preachers come over and they try to like, you know, do their church jokes, the Swedes have never heard it because they were Vikings and didn't grow up with the same things.
Yeah, I considered it an incredible compliment when they kept saying that our messaging fit the Swedish culture. And
for sure. At
one point he said, it's pretty rare for someone to come and actually speak to us as if we're intelligent.
Yeah.
And I to me, that's the greatest compliment, when you go into a new culture and people say, you sound like you're one of us. Because that means I've paid attention, I've listened. And I've become a part of that community, and that's an important part of communication. And that's the thing is like the funny thing, you know, when you came back, because Carl's actually from South Carolina,
West Virginia.
West Virginia?
I think West Virginia.
Somewhere in the south over there.
I think he played ball at North Carolina.
Or South Carolina. North Carolina State. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he has kind of a southern accent.
Yeah.
In New York.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So you didn't come back with a New York accent, and you didn't come back with the Angelino accent that you had for 25 years.
No.
You came back with a Southern accent.
Yeah.
And this is the power of influence, by the way.
Yeah.
See, it's not a negative thing. It's the power of influence that when you affect someone's life, they almost naturally want to reflect you. And I think that's one of the things I love about Mosaic.
Yeah.
Like, we around the world, I heard one of the pastors actually say, it doesn't matter if you believe in God, he believes in you. I mean, that's Mosaic language.
Oh, yeah. Was it Pastor Thomas in Copenhagen?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Man, he's incredible.
And I was like so touched because I thought our languaging is spreading across the world. And our language is really carefully crafted to be sensitive and caring to people outside of faith.
Yeah. And it's cool too because there's things that, like, we were in Stockholm and one on Pastor Andreas and Lena and then we were hanging out with Eric and who I just cannot say his last name, and Jonathan. Yeah. And they're just the coolest people. I felt like we were with family and it was immediately I was stealing things from them. Like I was texting like our guys who were behind the camera, like, hey, can we just do this a little bit like these guys? And I was getting links and sending them. And so I think that's the beauty of the modern church, especially with technology. Like you can
steal faster.
It's harder. You can steal faster, but then it's like you gotta like you also need to change things and make it your own thing and like make things unique.
One of the funniest things to me was that we were in Copenhagen, and there's a pretty conservative church there. They have a beautiful building, and on their marquee they had a sign that said,
"No, that was in Stockholm. It was the big church in Stockholm."
Was it in Stockholm? Oh, it was in Stockholm.
Across from that's right. We had dinner,
and on their marquee it said, "Come as you are,"
which point that camera at me. Which, if you've never been to Mosaic Venice, was in neon signs. Also,
yeah, but where did you get that?
I got that from Nirvana, from Kurt Cobain. That's my first song I ever learned on the guitar.
So here's the funny thing. So Aaron starts Mosaic Venice and decides that the theme out there will be "Come as you are," Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, and this church is so conservative
and has
that if they knew it was actually from Nirvana,
yeah,
they would burn their building down. And so you actually took a phrase from a world that they probably aren't comfortable with.
For sure. They probably don't even know.
You sanctified it. You made it sacred by making it a church phrase, logo. And now it's all the way across the world, and they don't even know to thank Kurt.
Yeah, and that's funny. But yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if I said Nirvana?
I know. And if you're listening and you go to that church, we love you guys.
We think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's not. This is only in like good fun.
No, but that's a part of the wonder of it is that when the church listens carefully, absorbs the language of the world around them, translate that language to actually become a language of faith, then it becomes normal and it becomes almost accessible to the rest of the church that maybe isn't as comfortable. One of the things I thought was so amazing is that we were in two countries, Sweden and Denmark. We talked more about Sweden. And we were there in Stockholm and Copenhagen. We both Scandinavia, both the world of the Vikings, right? Which is why my beard is an homage to my Viking roots. And yet they were so different. And there were some similarities, but there were incredible differences. And with Andreas, you had almost like the sense of a kind of this rogue guy who is growing this church in the most like raw and ruthless kind of way. Yeah. And then you go to Copenhagen and you're with Pastor Thomas and this guy starts this church from scratch. There's only 50,000 Christians in the whole country. Yeah. And he starts with 50 strangers in his house. Yeah. And now has the largest church in the entire country. Yeah. Meeting in, I think we met, and I can't say any of the names, but we met in like they're essentially like their circus like auditorium. Like it was like this. They have like a permanent circus. Circus in the city. Like it was so cool. It was so cool. And they did their 5-year anniversary and they invited us to it, and it was. And his life is in coffee shops, restaurants, and bars. Yeah. I mean that guy he's incredible. He is, and it was so inspired because I was like, when do you go home? And he's like, I'm just, I'm always, which like honestly, like not to throw him under the bus, like he also has the most incredible wife, incredible family, an incredible team. Like they're in the grassroots of, he's like, I go home, I see my family, I go out, I go see like all these people who like own restaurants and he's just moving and shaking and always loving people. We took us to dinner
and he's saying hi to getting to the table was a process because everyone was saying hi, and these people, one guy, what did the one guy say when he walked in? He called him Jesus.
He goes, "Oh, hello, Jesus."
Hey, Jesus.
And the guy is a chef,
50-year-old guy or 45-year-old guy.
I think that guy was a chef who's an atheist.
Yeah.
And he's mocking him by calling him Jesus.
Yeah, he calls him Jesus.
And he goes, "Did you get any converts this week?"
Yeah.
And so he's mocking him, but then he said, "Well, yeah, we've been talking about you this week," and there it was.
Yeah.
Even though he's mocking him, they've been talking about him all week.
Yeah, his friends ratted him out. He was like, "Hey," he said, "Oh, he's just saying that because he's been talking about you all night." And he had been preempting it, like trying to get him to go to church at the Sunday that you were speaking, and it was super cool to kind of just see like how they're all friends and they're actually in community, and there was like clear authority but also clear like love, and then to be from his team, and then just how like he's just a wild man, like he genuinely believes in like going and tracking down people who do not go to. He says like, I'm gonna grow this church. Like my team's gonna see how I grow this church, and they're gonna grow this church because and I was talking to his team, and they were inviting like 3 or 4 people that they worked with, and it was just so cool to see it kind of trickle down. Yeah,
I think one of the things I really learned, and one I just loved Jesper, who was such an incredible leader. Yeah, and he looks like a Viking.
Yeah.
The 2 things that really struck with me was one, when we finished dinner at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning.
Goodness, they know how to eat.
Yeah, he went to another event to meet with more people. We went to bed.
Yeah,
he went out to
and he went
connect
and did
more people.
Like a lap to go make sure those people that were by us having dinner, like they were coming to church.
And then at one place, I guess the richest man in the country just happened to be in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And he was bold enough to get up, walk across the room, walk over to him and say, "I just want to congratulate you on your great success."
Yeah, he looked at because you were taking a phone call.
Yeah.
Right before he got back, and he said that's one of the most influential men in the nation, in Scandinavia. He lives in Switzerland half the time, lives here half the time. And I said, "What are you going to do about it?" And he said, "I'm going to go talk to him. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in God moments." Yeah. And he walks over and he said something. He goes, I asked him, because you got back, and then we explained what happened, and then he said, I said the most un-Danish thing. Say congratulations on everything that you've built. And he said he was so shocked. He said, "Oh wow, that was kind." And he said, "Thank you." And he said, "I'm the pastor of Hillsong Copenhagen." And I thought it was the coolest story to actually be there and to have that. And it was just so cool.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's been fun reminiscing on not only what we experienced, but what we've learned. And maybe if I would summarize it, I go 2 completely different individuals, Andreas and Thomas.
Yeah.
With different gifting and different personalities, and yet both of them incredibly effective. Yeah. And taking responsibility for the growth, taking responsibility for their nations with vision so big that growing a church was too small of a dream. They're trying to transform their nations through the power of the church. Right. And so it's interesting, they completely believe in the importance of the local church, which is one of the things that really struck me, that the church really is Jesus' idea. The church really is Jesus' singular strategy for changing the course of humanity's future. And if we believed in the church as much as these men, I think we would see the kind of impact that they've had. Yeah. And I've learned so much on that, on this trip together. Much. And just so inspired by them that I know that even here, everyone doesn't have to be the same. Yeah. But what was the question that Pastor Thomas asked? How do you build this into people? He
asked you, how do you build it into people? And then
build what into people?
Yeah. The word that I said, but I don't. And we basically just a ruthlessness and a bloodlust, because we compared it. That sounds so bad on podcast.
You don't want to say that. But
I don't want to say that, but I said it.
It was like,
because I said basically, like, when there's blood, the difference between certain people and certain leaders is when there's blood in the water. Like when one person comes to Jesus, that person can smell it, and it goes into a frenzy of like inviting the next person, then the next person, the next person, and then you just see radical change. And then so many times we have young people who want position, but it's okay to want to be a part of a team. Yeah. But like when you want to lead at a high level, they want to XYZ, but there's no like ruthlessness for their friends. There's no relentless desire and no bloodlust.
Blood hunger may
try
not
to get
be,
them excited, and
maybe not be the warmest, imagery.
Yeah.
But I do think that leaders have like a blood hunger, like they they wake up in the morning and they're determined to make a difference. Yeah. They wake up with a passion and an urgency. They don't think things can wait. And
I think there's a life and death nature. I'm trying to like disclaim all this stuff because sometimes we live in a violent country for sure. But if in the Viking world,
we were talking to Vikings.
We're talking to Vikings, but also just the fact that like it is life and death for a lot of people, and we forget that. And I think when church isn't life or death, when you realize that people are coming through, I think sometimes we just go, oh, they came to a great service. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, like we had a chance to change their life and to share Jesus with them. Did we do it or not?
Yeah.
Like it was like if they died tonight, would their life have been changed? Mm-hmm. And I think I've had friends who've walked in and then died, and it's just sad. Like you know what I mean? Like we've both had people, and I think we face that reality of like when your skin's actually in the game, when your family's actually on the line, what's actually going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then it's interesting that having that same kind of.
But I'm gonna ask you the same question. Yeah. How do you get that person? How do you identify those people, and how do you get people excited about, like, okay, their friend came to Jesus? Like, can you teach it?
Yeah, I don't know if you can teach it. I think this is one of those things where I think it has to be caught, not taught. And passion can't be taught. Passion has to be caught. Passion has to be transferred through like the banging of lives together. And you know, it's easier to find passionate people that you can help with character and give skills than it is to find people with skills and try to put passion in them.
That's so true.
And I thought interesting combination, because when you use the language, you know, I understand the hunting Viking kind of language that used, you know, having that blood hunger.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, he said a part of what we talk to our core leaders is you're my firewall.
Yeah.
Because when you have an intensity, when you are deeply passionate, when you have that sense of hunger to make a difference in the world, you can also have too much blunt force trauma. You can hurt people without realizing it. People get burned in the fire.
Well, he said, he goes, you're seeing now all of the behind the scene moments that are really hard.
Yeah.
Like before I was giving, he said that this is the best like contrasting statement. He said, before I was giving you volunteer hugs. Like Sunday morning volunteer hugs, and then he's like, but what happened to all the volunteer hugs? I don't get hugged anymore.
That's true. He was saying that when volunteers came on staff, they were confused, going, wait a minute, what happened to the hugs? What happened to the love? He goes, no, you're on the team now. You're the firewall. You're
the firewall. Now you're there for all the good and the bad moments, and you got to give the love.
But he also said, I have to be intense. Like this is who I am. This is how I lead. Your job is to make sure that you absorb that intensity, and then you give the hugs to the volunteers.
Yeah.
And so that because you can't relate to volunteers the same way you do to staff. But that's an important point, that's how you can know that you are ready to be on a team.
Right.
When you're ready for the fire.
Yeah.
And if you still need the hugs a lot, you're probably not ready to be on the front line.
Yeah, and there's lots of people, me included, I've gone behind the curtain, and then it's been hard. It's hard to, I've been on both ends. I've been on the failing end where I've been too hard on people, and then the receiving end of like, okay, that guy was maybe too hard on me. And it's a hard thing to reconcile, because you're like, oh, I'm in church, but then, I always think like, I'm like, when you're in business, like I get yelled at all the time, and no one said apologize. They just like took me out afterwards for a drink or like food or something. There was no like pat on the back. It was like, hey, you messed up. That cost us money. And then now I'm like, we're in the business of, not in the business of, but like we're in the world of lives. We're like, so for me, it's more intense, and it's been a teaching experience. But I think even for young people, it's hard to catch passion. But I don't know. I think part of it is people listen to too many speakers and think that yelling when they preach is passion, rather than living like a passionate life. Because one thing you've taught me is, I think a lot of people say it, but I think you've like showed me the reality is like Sunday is like, when Sunday starts, it's almost like, okay, not sit back and watch, but we should have already done the work to have gotten us to this place for today to be great. Because if we're having to work today, then we're scrambling for success rather than actually like building into the best day that we get to do. You know what I mean? Monday through Saturday is the work of like spending time with people and getting to like, I almost don't get to see my friends on Sundays. And unless they're awesome and stay forever afterwards. you know what I mean? Like I'm inviting people all week
Yeah.
for that one moment. You know,
we talk about how we mistake yelling for passion.
Yeah.
I instantly started thinking about how in film it's so interesting because one of the people that I think evokes and expresses so much passion is Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
And I've never heard him yell. In fact, sometimes he just doesn't even talk. He just goes,
He just like grunts.
and
he's like, yeah.
He makes a sound and you're like nervous.
He's like a grizzly bear. You hear it
yeah.
and it's like a yell.
And the person I think of yelling is Will Ferrell.
Always.
He yells a lot. You want to tell like a
like
night
yelling, crying. Yeah.
Elf. I think we've confused passion with yelling.
Yeah.
And in fact, I tell people, look, if you yell the whole time, it's the same thing as monotone.
Yeah.
Because if it's the same way the whole way through, there is no difference. And how will anyone ever know what you actually care about if you're yelling the whole time?
Yeah, it's true.
You know?
No, it's true.
And for me, and I know I'm a pretty intense person, but that intensity comes when I care deeply about something. Right. That's why a lot of times when someone speaks, I'll say to them, what makes you angry? Like, what are you angry about? What are you going to war against right now?
Yeah.
Because if you can actually focus on, I am going to war against loneliness or despair. I'm going to war against greed and avarice. Like when you are, then you are able to tap into that, like that warrior spirit, and that passion and that intensity is authentic and it's real. You don't have to work it up. You don't have to make it up. It comes from the depth of your soul.